So today's daf yomi is Sanhedrin Yud Beis. We're going to start on the bottom of 11b on the last line. Today's daf yomi is dedicated for a shmir for the Chayalim, a Torah for the Shvuyim, and a Yeshua for Am Yisrael. Gemara says, Tan Rabbanan, Ein Ma'abrin Es Hashana B'Shnei Ravon. We do not make a leap year. We don't add an extra month in we don't make a leap year if it's a year of a famine on top of 12a. And the reason is because there's no food to eat, and you need to eat from the old crops that finished, and you need to eat from the new crops. And so since you need to eat from the new crops, you don't want to wait till Pesach. You want to do it as soon as possible. So in a year of a famine, you don't make a leap year. Rabbi Omer, Rabbi says, I'll bring you Tanya. Gemara says that there's different gearses here, but how you Rabbi Meir Omer, that Rabbi Meir taught Ish ba mi Baal Shalisha, that it talks about at the time of Elisha, a man came from Baal Shalisha vayavei leisha ha'elokim lechem bikurim esrim lechem sorim. He brought barley bread. Ve'en chakala b'chol Eretz Yisrael v'ashal perusel yoter mi Baal Shalisha. There was no land in the land of Israel that was quicker for the food to ripen more than the place called Baal Shalisha. And Afal Pikain o Bachra ela min echad. And nevertheless, he only chose one of the crops, meaning to say he only could take was the barley. The Shema Tomar Chita, maybe you'll think it was wheat. Tam Omer Sa'orim, it was the barley. And Shema Tomar Ufnei Omer, maybe you'll say that he took it from before the barley. And so therefore he took it in its appropriate time. It was from the new grain. Tam Omer Tein La'am V'yochelu, give it to the people and they will eat. So therefore, since he's basically saying that the Omer was brought and the Chadash was allowed. And we'll say that this year, really, they should have made a leap year. Why didn't Elisha make a leap year? Because it was a time of famine, and everybody was running to the granary. We're on 12a, around 10 lines from the top. Tana Rabbanan, Eben Abernes Hashana Lefnei Rosh Hashanah. We don't make a leap year before Rosh Hashanah. We only do it after Rosh Hashanah. Rashi says the reason is because if you make it before Rosh Hashanah, people forget, and then they'll start eating the chametz on Pesach. V'mebrua ena milberes. And if you would make a leap year, it's not considered a leap year. And if it's a time of distress, you can make the leap year right after Rosh Hashanah. But even though you declare the leap year right after Rosh Hashanah, the month that you add is Adar. Rashi says the Beis Din doesn't sit prior to Rosh Hashanah because people are going to forget about it and they'll eat the chametz. But let's say we're worried that there won't be a Beis Din will be able to get together before Adar, or maybe the Roman king will come and he'll stop them. And therefore, you tell them right after Rosh Hashanah, and you declare it immediately after Rosh Hashanah. So the Gemara says, is this really the case? You only make Adar into the month of the extra month. So you mean you make two Adars. What's the reason why we do Adar? Because it says in the book of Esther that Adar is the 12th month. But who's the one who said that? Haman said that. And still we see that Haman is the one that is our source for the idea that we make Adar 12 months. Is this really the case? They sent a message to Rava, Zug, and they sent a coded message to Rava because they were concerned about the authorities stopping them. The leap years were very, very political, highly political. And so they were worried that they were going to get caught. And so they sent a message by a code. And they said, Zugba mirakes, A pair is coming from Rekes, which Rashi tells us means a pair of Torah scholars is coming from Tiberias, another name for Tiberias is Rekes. The Tavsu Nesher, and the eagle seized them, and that was a reference to the Persian government. Ubiyadam, and in their possessions, in their hands was Dvar Manat Sebeluz, things that were made in luz, and that refers to Umayni, that refers to Tchelas. And B'schut Sarachamim, in the merit of the merciful one, Ubischutam, and in their own merciful merit, Yatsu B'Shalom, they were able to be released in peace. Amuse Yereche Nachshon, and Amuse Yereche Nachshon, this is the print, this refers to the Nazi in the land of Israel, who was from the seed of Nachshon, who was the first of the Nisiyim. So Amuse Yereche Nachshon, Bikshu Ekvoa Nitziv Echad. He wanted to establish an extra month. V'lo Nichan Adomi Alaz. And the Roman kingdom did not want to allow them to declare this leap year. Avobalia Sufos Nesfu. But the Balia Sufos, this refers to the Torah scholars, they gathered together and they established an extra month in the month that Aaron died, which we know from Parashas Maaseh is the month of Av. So we see from here that it's not Adar, but so we see from here that they did this in Av, which is even before Rosh Hashanah. And so why do we say you can't establish the leap year in the month of Rosh Hashanah? You see from here that they did it even in the month of Av. So the Gemara says, they did their calculations, they did their calculations, but they didn't actually reveal this to the community. They only revealed this to the community after Rosh Hashanah so that people will not forget about it and come to the michshol of eating the chametz on the wrong month, of eating the chametz on Pesach. Gemara says, "My mashma dahai nitziv lishna diyarchu." How do we know that the expression nitziv is an expression of a month? Because Gemara says, "Ksiv u'shlomo shnei masar nitzivim al kol Yisrael." Shlomo had 12 nitzivim. He had 12 nitzavim over all of Israel. V'kilkol samelches beiso chodesh b'shana, and they sustained the king and his household each month. Meaning the king had 12 officers over the 12 regions, and each one of them was appointed to collect from that area the amount that was needed for the support of the king for 1 month of the year. And so these nitzavim were supported for each month, and so therefore they refer to a month as a nitziv. Mara says uksiv, v'aksiv unitziv echad asher ba'aretz, but it says in the book of Kings that there were 12 nitzivim on the 12 months. But then it says that there was one nitziv over the whole land. So what was his job? So the Gemara says, Rav Yehuda, Rav Nachman, Chad Amar, Echem Amunah Kulam. This was one additional nitziv over all the other nitzivim. Chad Amar, Keneged Chodesh HaIbor. No, that was in case there was a leap year. So he had to make up for it if it was a leap year. Taner Rabbanan, Ema Aber Nesashana Lo Mishana Chaverta. We don't make a leap year, not from 1 year to the next. What does Rashi say that means? Rashi says, if this year needs one, we don't, meaning to say, if the next year needs it to be a leap year, we don't make this year a leap year because we know the next year needs it. We wait for the next year. That's how Rashi explains it. But Tosfos says, Eino Lashon Mashmakain. Tosfos says that's not what the real expression of the language means. Tosfos says that doesn't make sense. Therefore, Tosfos says what this means is what we do is, Tosfos has a different explanation. Tosfos says, we don't make our calculations about this year for the next year. And even though we don't reveal it, we don't mechashven on this year for next year. We don't calculate this year for next year. Some of the reasons are the crops are ready, but also because the seasons are off. They could calculate it. Yeah, they could calculate. And we don't make 3 years a leap year consecutively, because as a result of that, the years will be two switched, and the third Nisan will end up in this summer. Rabbi Akiva was once trapped in prison, and even when he was in prison, he did it 3 years in a row. Meaning to say, since Rabbi Akiva was so wise and he was an expert in the leap year, and they were about to kill him, the court came to him and they sat with him to establish which of the years that were coming up would need to be a leap year. And he established the leap years of 3 years, but not 3 years in a row. Means say Rabbi Akiva was in prison, and he taught everybody in prison what the next 3 leap years would be. But it wasn't 3 years in a row. We know that when Rabbi Akiva was in prison, the Gemara tells us that his students came to him and say, "Why are you teaching Torah? That's how you're teaching us Torah in prison, but this is how you ended up in prison. How can you be teaching us the Torah in prison?" And what was Rabbi Akiva's response? Why did Rabbi Akiva say he was teaching the Torah in prison? Rabbi Akiva said, just like he said, more than the cow needs to give, more than the calf needs to suck, the cow needs to give the milk. So the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, we don't make a leap year in the sabbatical year and not in the year after Shvius. We don't make a leap year in the sabbatical year because they're not allowed to work the land in the sabbatical year, and therefore you're extending the prohibition. And not in the Motzi Shvius, not the year after the sabbatical year, because the sabbatical year is completed because you're done with the old crops, and then you can't eat the new crops until the one extra month, because you have to wait for Pesach. And so therefore, so the Gemara says, so therefore the Gemara says, when was there a custom to make a leap year? Erev Shvi, in the 6th year, that they would give them an extra month of working the land. But also Motzei Shvius, they would also make a leap year in the year after. And they weren't concerned about extending the prohibition of Chadash. Why? Because they thought that you're allowed to bring from Eretz Yisrael the crops from outside the land of Israel. They weren't worried about importing crops, as we'll see as a concern. But Pukta Dahani Tanai, the Tanya, Emavi and Yerach Michutz La'aretz, you're not allowed to bring vegetables from outside the land of Israel. The Rabboseinu Itiru, and the rabbis allowed you to bring. So the Tanna Kama says you can't bring vegetables from outside of Israel, and the rabbis allowed you. My benayu, what's the reason why they said you can't bring vegetables, that you can't import it? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, you have to be concerned whether or not the dispute between them was whether or not you have to be concerned that the earth from outside the land of Israel is going to bring with it dead bones in the earth, which is tumah. And so therefore, that's a concern whether or not you can bring vegetables you can import produce. So that's why they ask you when you're going into Israel today, do they say, are you bringing fruits or vegetables? They're worried about the tumah. That's not why, but probably the same source, really, at its source. They don't want you bringing in produce because the local farmers are not happy. So now another reason why you don't make a leap year is because of tumah, meaning to say, if the court sees that the most of the community is tameh and it's coming time to bring the Korban Pesach and they won't have ability to make themselves pure, they shouldn't make a leap year so that they would have time to purify themselves. But rather, what can you do? You bring the Korban Pesach in a state of ritual impurity. That's why we don't need the red heifer today in order to bring the Pesach. We don't need a parah aduma today to bring the Korban Pesach. We don't need anything to bring the Korban Pesach. You know that this year we could just go and bring the Korban Pesach. There's no halachic reason why we can't. What could you do? You could you don't need a mizbeach. You don't even need the altar. You don't even need the altar to bring the Korban Pesach. You just need the Makom HaMizbeach, the place of the altar. You could just bring the Paschal lamb or a goat with you up on the Temple Mount and slaughter it and then roast it, and you'd be able to bring the Korban Pesach. The only problem is that it's a political problem that the Israeli government has made the decision that it's not good for the security of the country to bring it. But from a halachic problem, it's not an issue to be able to bring the Korban Pesach today, because you can bring in a state of ritual impurity. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ma'abran. Rabbi Yehuda say, you mean, you know what I'm saying? It's a political issue. That's a political. Well, I mean, that you're saying that there's another reason that you should be concerned. People could argue that both ways. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ma'abran. Rabbi Yehuda says that you can make a leap year. You should make the leap year in order to bring the Pesach in a state of ritual purity. And Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Ma'aseh b'Chizkiah Melech Yehuda she'iber Hashanim b'nei Tumah. Indeed, Chizkiah, the king of Judah, did make a leap year on account of the Tumah, that most of the people were Tamei, and he made a leap year so that they become purified. And he requested mercy for himself for having done this sin. So you see, he regretted making the leap year on account of Tumah because he said we didn't have to do it. Meaning to say, since most of the people were Tamei, Chizkiyahu made a leap year. But afterwards, it was clear that this was not proper. And so therefore, they ate the Korban Pesach in proper time. And so therefore, he requested mercy. So Rabbi Shimon says, if they made a leap year on account of the Tumah, Muberes, so then it would have worked, and it wouldn't have been a sin. Why did Chizkiyahu ask for mercy? Because really you're only supposed to make a leap year in the month of Adar. But he did it too late. He did Nisan. You can't make a leap year in Nisan. People have already started leaving. They've already left for Jerusalem. He messed up everybody's plans. Now, why did he request mercy for himself? Because he forced the Jewish people to bring a second Pesach. And this he did improperly. Since most of the people were Tamei, they could have done it in the first Pesach and burned in a state of Tumah. And so he requested mercy for himself. And we're going to now analyze this. Amar Ma'ar, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ma'abra. Rabbi Yehuda says that you make a leap year on account of the ritual impurity. Alma, we see from here, Islay Rabbi Yehuda, Tumah Dechuyi B'tzibur. We see from here, Rabbi Yehuda's at the position that, generally speaking, when you're allowed to bring a korban in a state of ritual impurity, that's not ideal. When you're bringing the korban, it's techuya, it's pushed off, but it's not ideal. It's not hutra. It's not totally permitted. It's like, there's a question which you have about Shabbos. If you're allowed to violate the Shabbos because you want to save somebody's life, is it completely permitted, or is it techuya, or is it just pushed off? I mean, say, do you still have to minimize the prohibitions? Let's say you're the doctor and you're going to the hospital. Are you allowed to take the elevator, or do you have to take the steps at that point once you're there? So we say, do we say Tumah Dechuya Hibit Sibor? So he's at a position, Rabbi Yehuda's at a position that it's just pushed off, and so therefore you're better off to delay at a month so people can become purified. Gemara says, is that really the case that he's at that position? Vatanya tzitz. The tzitz is the golden forehead plate that the Kohen Gadol wears. Bein sheyeshno mitzcho, bein she'eno mitzcho maratza. Whether it's on the forehead of a Kohen Gadol or not, it serves as an atonement for ritual impurity that you brought a korban while you're ritually impure. That's the position of Rabbi Shimon. It's Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Odal Mitzvah Maratza, Eno Odal Mitzvah Eno Maratza. So while it's on his forehead, it serves as an atonement, but it's not, it doesn't. And I'm Rabbi Shimon, Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim Yochiach. So he says, how could you say that if the tzitz is not on his forehead, it doesn't serve as an atonement? What about the Kohen Gadol when he goes into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur? She'eno Mitzvah, that the tzitz is not on his forehead because he's wearing the white garments, and nevertheless, Maratza. And if there was, it serves as an atonement if there was tumah on one of the karbanos. So I'm Rabbi Yehuda, Hanach Yom Kippurim. Leave me alone with Yom Kippurim. It's all communal offerings, and Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. And there, Rabbi Yehuda says that Tumah is totally allowed in a communal offering. So how can you say Rabbi Yehuda says Tuchuya B'tzibur, and therefore he says don't delay it, don't make a leap year, but on Yom Kippur he proves it's Hutra. Mara says, according to your logic, there's an internal contradiction. Rabbi Yehuda says Ma'abrin, because it says there that Rabbi Yehuda makes it a leap year because Tumah is pushed off for even for communal needs. And I'm Rabbi Yehuda, and he requested mercy because he did it improperly. But why should he request the mercy? Because Rabbi Yehuda says that indeed you made a leap year on account of Tumah. And so Chizkiyahu did it properly. So we have to say that the text is missing words. And this is what it means to say, we don't make a leap year on account of Tumah. But if you did make a leap year, Mubaris, it does work. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, Eina Mubaris. Rabbi Yehuda says it doesn't even work. And the proof that it doesn't even work is because of Chizkiyahu requesting mercy for himself. So Rabbi Shimon Omer if that's the case, Rabbi Shimon says that if you did do it when you weren't, if you did it on account of being tamei, it works. That's the same position as the Tanakama. So the Gemara says, the distinction between them is whether or not you should ideally do it. According to Tanakama, you shouldn't ideally make a leap year on account of Tumah. Rabbi Shimon says you could. So basically, yeah, because he says it's hutra. He says that Tumah is completely permitted, and so therefore you shouldn't have made a leap year. And that's why Chizkiyahu had to request mercy. He doesn't say dechuya, he says hutra. Right, so we changed that position. We changed that text because we had a contradiction, and so therefore we changed it. Although we had two contradictions, and also we had an internal and external contradiction. So Rabbi Yehuda says he shouldn't have made a leap year because it's completely permitted if there was people in Tamei. So that's why Chizkiyahu had to beg for mercy. Ideally, you don't make a leap year on account of Tumah. That's the position of Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon says Ma'abrin. Rabbi Shimon says you can't do it even ideally. If that's the case, but if that's the case, why did Chizkiyahu make request mercy? Because he made a leap year in Nisan. So that supports our reading that Rabbi Shimon says even ideally. You got a question, Bill? Amar Mar Sheim Abra Elad Ruiber Nisan and Nisan. So Chizkiyahu did it in Nisan, the leap year. But why did Chizkiyahu do this? Doesn't it say in the Brisa? It says in the pasuk, this month shall be for you. Then Nisan vein achar Nisan. You can only have one Nisan. You can't make two. So how did he do it? So Tabed Shmuel. He made a mistake in the position of Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel. Obviously, Shmuel was. So he made a mistake in this halacha that Shmuel taught. Amar Shmuel. Ema Abernes Hashana biyom shloshim shel Adar. Of the royal kavod Nisan. Shmuel said you can't make a leap year once you reach the 30th day of the month of Adar, since that day could have actually been declared the month of Nisan, if Adar would have been 29 days. Whereas Chizkiyahu said, no, he said, since it would be appropriate to declare Nisan, we don't say that. As long as we haven't started Nisan, you could do it. And so therefore he made a leap year on the 30th day of Adar. And then he admitted, I should have made a mistake. I never should have made, once it reached the 30th day of Adar, I never should have made it a leap year. And Tanya Namiachi also, we say, Ema Abrin es Hashana, B'yom Shloshim Shal Adar, Hol V'Royal Kavod B'Nisan. We don't make a leap year once it reaches the 30th day of Adar, since you should declare that, since it's able to have already been declared Nisan, you don't make it a leap year. Shimon Yehuda, Shimon, no, what's the reason why Chizkiyahu asked for mercy? Because he caused them to do a Pesach Sheni improperly. Because they could have brought the first Pesach. What was his mistake? Echidami. What was the mistake of Chizkiah? At first, that he caused them to do a Pesach Sheni. In the end, he said, "Oh, that was a big mistake." Half of the Jewish people were tamei, and the other half were tahor. And women added on to the tahor people, and it made it so that there were more ritually pure people than tamei people. Meaning to say, the majority of the men were mostly tamei, and so therefore they could have brought the korban. Whereas the women, the majority were tahor. So the women, when they added on to the men, they made it more tahor people, and so therefore he made a leap year. But meikara savar nashim berishon chova. At first, he thought that women are obligated in the korban Pesach, and so therefore they should be counted as part of the people. Havum miyutan tameim. And therefore, there's a minority of people who are tamei. Miyutam mitchu Pesach sheni. A minority are pushed off to the second Pesach. And so therefore, he said that they shouldn't make a Pesach Rishon. Ubasov savar nashem berishon rishus. And in the end, he said, "Oh, the women are not obligated in korban Pesach, biblically speaking." This is actually machokas in Pesachim, whether or not they're obligating. Women are obligated in the korban Pesach. And so that way to Mayim Ruba, and so since he saw the women are just optional in this mitzvah, then therefore the majority of them are Tamei. The Ruba will mitchu Pesach Sheni, and the majority are not pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. And so therefore, since the majority are not pushed off to the Pesach Sheni, therefore you can make the korban. And so therefore his ruling to make a Pesach Sheni was improper. And so therefore he requested mercy for himself. Gufa Amar Shmuel Ema Abranas Hashana B'Yom Shloshim Shel Adar Hol V'Royal Kovo Nisan. You don't make a leap year you don't declare a leap year on the 30th day of Adar because that day was already established to be able to be Nisan. Let's say they did it. What would be the case? So what would be the case that based in if they did it improperly? Amar Ua, it would work, but a Mekachin is a Chodesh. Yeah, it would work, but you shouldn't say, the court should not say Mekudesh. They can't make Kiddush on it. They can't sanctify it. You know, the same Mekudesh, because it was really already capable of being Nisan. And so that's what Kitchumai, but let's say they did it. Obviously, once they did the Ibor, they would do the Kiddush. So Amar Rava, Batal Ibor. If they do the Kiddush when they weren't supposed to, then the leap year is canceled. Rav Nachman Amar Me'umar Mekudesh. No, it still works. It's Me'umar Mekudesh. I'm only Rav Nachman. Michti Mipuria Pesach Tlasin Yom Have Mipuria Darshina and Behochas Pesach. So Rav says to Rav Nachman, since from Purim to Pesach is 30 days, and from Purim we start to expound upon the laws of Pesach because it says Shalom Behochas Pesach Kolon Pesach Shloshim Yom. Start talking about the laws of Pesach 30 days prior to Pesach. Rav Shimon Gamliel Amar Shtei Shabbosos says 2 weeks. And now when Rosh Chodesh Nisan comes, we push it off a year. Then all of a sudden we're going to have, push it off by a month, you're going to have a big problem with chametz because people aren't going to realize. You already gave all the drashos, you put up the Pesach programs, everybody bought their tickets to go to Mexico for Pesach or wherever they're going, and they're going to I don't know if people are going to go to UAE this year after what happened there, the terrible attack in the UAE, but wherever they go for Pesach. And then 2 weeks before, the court in Jerusalem declares it. They put out a message on the internet, but everybody's already got their ticket. They're going to Pesach in 2 weeks. They're going to start eating chametz on Pesach because they're not going to do Pesach again. I think they're going to do a second Seder. So I'm like, made the yadi the shatim orta. No, the people will follow the news. They'll get the internet report. They'll get the update, and they'll know that the rabbis didn't have the calculation until now, and so they're not worried about that. They're not worried about people eating chametz. People will know. Yeah, sure. You'll get your money back. I'm sure. All right, we'll stop here. Everybody have a great day. Yashar koyach.